All right, so today we're going to be talking about basically from Homo erectus through the beginnings of Homo sapiens. In this chapter, we are covering the Pleistocene era, which is a big word and a long time. It goes from about, textbook tells you, it goes from about 2.6 million years ago, where you had basically the emergence of some of those stone tools up until about 12,000 years ago. In the old days, we just called this the Stone Age, which sounds cooler, but now we call it the Pleistocene. The Stone Age maybe sounds too stone, like primitive, but in fact, a lot of cool things happened during this time. So it's probably better to call it the Pleistocene. We have these tools, for example, which were found in South Africa. And sometimes we get, as it says, we don't know exactly which group of Homo creatures made these. They were in South Africa, but you can see they're getting a little more sophisticated than things that people can do by bashing stones together, or even capuchin monkeys can do, getting more sophisticated points and edges and things like that. And so this is the time, during this time, we see a couple huge things going on. I told you about the mobility of some of the hominins and the bipedal mobility they had, combined with this cultural learning and the ability to make and use tools. So you start to see these creatures radiate and expand their range. For the first time, we have bipedal primates outside of Africa. And so again, these are an important time, this whole Pleistocene Stone Age stuff. And I hope, like me, when you saw this skeleton of a person we have nicknamed Nariokotome Boy, found in present-day Kenya, one of the most complete Homo erectus skeletons from 1.6 million years ago. So in the last class, we were looking at some of the australopiths and the way that we saw their fossilized footprints in the volcanic Laetoli ash in Ethiopia. We saw that they were getting a little taller, about 4 feet tall. Saw that a little bit of brain expansion, but not much. You're still up until about 2.5 million years ago, dealing with creatures that are bipedal, but with ape-like crania. When you see a skeleton like this, well, let's just deal with the tall part. Remember that up until now, we've been dealing with creatures that are 3, 4 feet tall. Now, we have in this skeleton, and we're not going to say that all the skeletons were this tall. Maybe this is just a tall one, but we have a height of almost 6 feet tall, pretty similar to modern humans, and looking like us, doing fully bipedal walking. So able to move a little bit more, perhaps more rapidly on the landscape. You go from endurance walking to maybe doing some endurance running we talked about, and being able to travel over longer distances. Again, that's not to say that we're all tall. There's a large variation in their skeletal forms, but we're getting some heights that are getting up toward modern human range. And we have some more footprints, some more cool footprints. Remember, we saw footprints from about 2.5 million years ago, and those were cool because they showed that the creatures were habitually bipedal and could walk pretty well, and the toes were aligned with the front of the foot. But these footprints at 1.5 million years ago with the Homo erectus are pretty much the same as modern bipedalism. The Homo erectus, if you take our own foot, there, somebody's done it, put their own foot in there, stride along, they are walking pretty much like modern humans do. Don't want to say exactly like, but pretty close. Probably walk this out if you wanted to. So it's pretty exciting. Taller, securely bipedal, adapted to this changing environment. Of course, everybody wants to know about their brains. We have some pretty rapid brain expansion with the Homo erectus. Now, probably some of that is just getting bigger, the bigger you are in some ways in proportion to body size, but you see some brain reorganization as well. So it's not just about the size, it's about the way some of those lobes and cortexes are organized. How smart did they get? Pretty smart. Yeah, yeah. What do we think they might have almost already been able to do? Almost able to use language. So language is one of those things. We'll talk more about it. It's impossible to tell from the fossil record. Maybe they were talking. Who knows? They're definitely communicating, making noises, organizing themselves in groups. And it seems like they may have been, you might say, language ready. They were on the cusp of language, or maybe they were close. So yeah, pretty smart creatures, pretty tall, pretty bipedal, pretty able to do things. And we see a development in their tools. So we talked about those tools that we probably couldn't distinguish between things that are broken off from stones and what monkeys can do just by looking for dust to lick. But for the Homo erectus tools, we see what are called Acheulean tools. So the basic ones that we saw in the last class are called Oldowan tools. These are known as Acheulean. They are called also hand axes. Now, this is a little bit misleading because sometimes if we think of a hand axe, then we're probably thinking of something that somebody has a wood and they're swinging it around. When they say hand axe, they're referring to these stones that you could hold in your hand and maybe use like an axe, but they're sharp all the way around. And so there's no evidence really that these were fastened to anything. So they weren't like axes in the modern sense of the word. And people, like with the Oldowan tools, there's some debate about what these things actually were used for. Were they used to throw at other things? Were they used to dig or to chop things? Some of them are sharp all the way around, so it's hard to hold it in your hands and use it like this. So some people still speculate that these are the back product or the byproduct of other tools maybe they're making. Maybe this is the last part of the tool that we find in the archaeological record. Obviously, they seem to be doing other things other than scavenging. We talked about that in the last class. Maybe they needed to do other things. They seem to be better able to gather things, better able to scavenge, and maybe even doing some hunting here as well. And so maybe they are using these tools in this way. But it signifies that we are combining together that mobility and the biological changes and the head stuff with the culture, with the learning from generation to generation. Culture comes into play, more learned behavior, being able to pass traditions on from generation to generation becomes crucial to the survival of the creatures in our lineage, becomes inbuilt into their developing biology and being able to apprentice style learn from people, leading us to today where we are learning more and more and more, faster and faster. Or are we? So we have Homo erectus emerging about 2 million years ago. In Africa, we saw the skeleton of the Nariokotome Boy from Kenya, and some of these great finds were in Africa. But what happens after that? Well, they don't all migrate, but they do migrate. Some of them go away from their places of origin. And for the first time in our evolutionary story, we see bipedal large-brained creatures go across Africa. That was the first place of spreading out, but then into Asia, all the way down here into almost Indonesia, all the way out here into the northeast of Asia. Some of our best Homo erectus skeletons are actually in what is now China, one of the first places they were discovered. And over here into Europe. And so we have this spreading out of people into these various regions. So we have here a species that evolves in Africa and continues to thrive in Africa. Let me be clear about that. But it also spreads out into very different environments and adapts to those environments. And there are some biological changes, and there's biological variability here. And we do see a variation in terms of the body size and brain size across these different regions, to the extent that some people have speculated that, are we really dealing with one single Homo erectus species, or are there several of them at this time? But one of the crucial reasons they're able to adapt to all these different areas, unlike other species, as Alexandra has put it, is that they are able to use tools and transform their environment and do different things with those tools as they move into different areas. And so this is crucial for the spread of Homo erectus, is that they are not simply biologically adapting to these different areas. They are adapting culturally and adapting their societies in order to confront these different situations. Again, there are lots of varied environments within Africa, and they're still thriving in Africa, as we'll see, but they're able to are able to spread out over a much wider range than many species would originally be able to.